Hello, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Zach Collins, and this is Financial Education. Today, we'll be going through the history of the three stages of tax cuts that we've just been through. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you must have been living under a bit of a rock, or maybe you're watching from outside of Australia. So, stage three, which was the last of the legislative tax cuts, came in at the start of the current financial year, being the 1st of July 2024. And from the start of the Labor government's term, they've been debating and complaining, saying they should scrap all the tax cuts, that had been legislated by the previous government, the Liberals. Up until about mid-January 24, they were still saying they had absolutely no plan to change the legislative changes, but they did. While I'm personally benefiting a bit more by the updated changes to the stage three tax cuts, my personal opinion is it's a bit of a breach of trust, especially considering it's been legislated and progress for a few years now. Now, politics aside, let's start from the very beginning. Before any of the tax cuts were implemented, there was a lot of arguing in the parliament. So the coalition, they introduced the three-stage tax cuts, and they really had the balance of power. I mean, they couldn't pass it on their own, but Labour and the Greens, they had no real standing. So Labour and the Greens were immediately in favour of stages like one and two, but they tried to split off stage three from the rest of the cuts because they just didn't want to make the cut to the top end. Now, the Liberals, they stood firm and basically said all or nothing. You want one, two, you got to have three with it as well. They eventually backed down, and as you know, we got the tax cuts. And so this is how the three stages look. So before the tax cuts came into effect, it looked very different to what it does today. So actually, the tax-free threshold has not changed at all throughout. So the government, started fiddling and making changes in the 2018 financial year. So if you made $18,200 or less back in 2018, bear in mind that's about 6 years ago, you would be paying no tax. If you earn the same amount today, you'd still be paying no tax. But that bracket hasn't changed, even though inflation over the same 6-year period has been about 20%. So if you were to index the brackets by inflation, it would mean that now you'd have a tax-free threshold of about $22,000 instead of 18. But that's not how they do it. The government wants the home run of legislative tax cuts and making a big hoo-ha about it, saying, we do this for the people, vote us back in. Okay, so what were the brackets back then? So as I said, the tax-free threshold was at $18,200. The 19-cent bracket went up to $37,000. Then there was a 32.5% bracket that went up to $87,000. And then the 37% went to $180,000. And anything over $180,000 was 45%. Now, all of these percentages, they're just purely income tax. We also have the Medicare levy, which is 2%, and that's on top of those numbers. But technically, it's not an income tax. So what change was included in stage one? Now, this was very minimal. They increased the 32.5% bracket from $87,000 to $90,000. I can't say this would have helped people an awful lot. I mean, they saved the difference of the 37 bracket to 32%, being 4.5 on about $3,000 of income. So for people on $90,000, it's a tax saving of $135. Now, the big draw card for stage one was not the tax saving, but they gave people a tax offset. This was the Limito. Now, people quite often call it the Limto, and I've also heard of people call it the Lamington. Now, I hate that term. I think that sounds stupid. But if that's how you want to describe it, good for you. It just doesn't sit right with me. So what was the Limito? First off, the Limito was a tax offset. Now, this is very different to a tax deduction. A tax deduction reduces your taxable income by that amount. So let's say you have a $10,000 tax deduction, and if you're in the 32.5% bracket, it means you're saving $3,250 in tax. If you had a $10,000 tax offset, however, it means you're paying $10,000 less in tax. So when you're comparing the two, an offset is better than a deduction. The Limito was a $1,080 tax offset, and this ran for the 2019 2020, 2021, and 2022 financial years. It was actually supposed to end in the 21 financial year, but due to COVID, the government they needed to provide another stimulus, so they kept it for another year, and they also increased it from $1,080 up to $1,500 for the final time. Now, I think people are still a little bit upset about losing the Lomito. I still hear people going on about it. But the whole design of it was supposed to be very short term. It was supposed to be in effect while waiting for the rest of the tax cuts to come through. But people, as they do, get addicted to the tax refunds, even if they're netting the same amount each year, with the tax cuts. They would rather have a big return at the end of the year to splurge rather than little bits throughout the year. Stage 2 gave a bit more of an obvious tax cut. Now, this started in the 2020-2021 financial year, so you're talking the middle of COVID. Everyone was super keen to get some tax benefits. Now, the first step was to increase the 19% bracket. So instead of it capping out at $37,000, they increased it to $45,000. Next, they moved to the 32.5% bracket. Now, stage 1 moved it to 90,000, but stage 2 moved it from 90 up to 120. Now, as I said just before, the Lomito was kept in stage 2 and eventually phased out. They did increase it in the 22 financial year, but they took it away completely in the 23 and the 24 financial years. So this brings us to where we are now, stage 3. So we're currently in the middle of the financial year, and at the start of January 2024, there was a debate, and basically the Labor government decided they're going to change the legislated tax cuts. On the left side of your screen is the tax cuts that were initially proposed and legislated. On the right-hand side, you'll see the new tax cuts. So the big thing of note is that the government is keeping the 37% tax bracket, and they're reducing the lowest tax rate from 19% down to 16%. So what's happening is that the tax cuts are being redistributed. Instead of basically only the top earners in town, the top 1%, getting a really large tax cut, every single taxpayer, down from someone earning $20,000 to $25,000, all the way up to millions a year, is getting a tax cut this year. Hopefully, I've been able to give you guys a better understanding of the 3 stages of income tax cuts that we've just gone through. And with the cost of living crisis we've been going through the past few years, I know I, for one, will definitely be looking forward to even a small tax cut that I'm getting on my income. I think I'm paying something like $20 less than tax a fortnight. It's nothing to write home about, but it's better than nothing. Now, hopefully you guys are getting some too. If you do have any more questions, please feel free to drop a comment below and I will make sure to answer it if I can. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.